Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The soft hum of the coffee machine broke the silence of the early morning as Martha stood in her modest kitchen, stirring sugar into her tea. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the golden rays of dawn that filtered through the windows. She liked these quiet moments before the world woke up. They gave her space to think, to plan. Martha glanced at the wall clock. 6:30 a.m. Rojas would be awake soon, and with him, the storm of demands and dismissive comments that had become her daily reality. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was her life now, an unyielding cycle of being belittled by a man who once promised her the world. Rojas entered the kitchen, his presence commanding but cold. His tailored suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame, and his expensive watch gleamed under the morning light. He was every bit the picture of success he worked so hard to project. But to Martha, he was a man hollowed out by vanity and ego. "You're up early," he remarked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. His tone carried no warmth, just mild surprise. "I couldn't sleep," Martha replied quietly, focusing on her tea. "Figures," he muttered, more to himself than her. "Anyway, I have a dinner meeting tonight. Don't wait up." Martha's heart sank, though she kept her face composed. She knew these dinner meetings were excuses to spend time with Hilda, his glamorous mistress. The whispers in their social circles, the late-night phone calls, the lipstick stains on his collar. Martha had stopped trying to confront him about it. Rojas always dismissed her concerns, accusing her of being paranoid or insecure. Her silence was her shield, but it didn't make the wounds hurt any less. Rojas had not always been this way. When they first met, his charm was intoxicating. He had swept Martha off her feet with promises of a bright future, a life filled with adventure and love. Back then, he had seen her as his equal, a partner who complemented his ambitions. But over the years, his vision of success warped into something superficial, driven by appearances and social status. Martha's quiet demeanor and preference for simplicity became targets for his disdain. "I don't understand why you insist on wasting your time with those crafts," he scoffed one evening as Martha sat at her desk, sketching a design for her latest project. "I enjoy it," she said without looking up. "It's my way of unwinding." "Well, it's not exactly productive," he retorted, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You could be doing something that actually matters." Martha clenched her jaw but didn't respond. He had no idea that her so-called crafts were prototypes for her secret business venture, Luxair, a luxury airline she had been quietly building for years. The birth of an idea. Luxair had started as a dream during the early years of their marriage, before Rojas's condescension eroded their relationship. Martha had always been fascinated by aviation and the possibilities it offered. She saw a gap in the market for an airline that combined opulence with personalized service, a travel experience that catered to the elite while prioritizing integrity and sustainability. While Rojas pursued flashy ventures and short-term gains, Martha laid the groundwork for her dream. She spent countless nights researching, networking, and designing. Her background in design and logistics, paired with her sharp intuition, proved invaluable. She quietly invested in her venture, funneling her inheritance and earnings into a series of holding companies to maintain her anonymity. Rojas had no idea that his unremarkable wife was building an empire beneath his very nose. The dinner party. The turning point came during a dinner party at their home. Rojas had invited his colleagues and a few influential business partners, eager to showcase his wealth and charm. Hilda was there too, her laughter echoing through the room as she clung to Rojas's arm, oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to Martha's presence. Martha played her role as the gracious hostess, ensuring the guests were comfortable. She knew the art of blending into the background, letting others take the spotlight. But as the evening wore on, Rojas's disdain for her became glaringly public. "Why don't you join the conversation, Martha?" one of the guests asked kindly. Surely you have some insights to share? Rojas chuckled before she could respond. Oh, Martha's not really one for business talk. She prefers her little hobbies. The room fell silent, the insult hanging in the air like smoke. Martha's cheeks burned, but she refused to let the humiliation show. She excused herself and retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and determination. It was in that moment, staring at the marble countertop, that she made a silent vow. She would no longer allow Rojas to define her worth. She had a vision, a purpose, and the strength to see it through. Hilda's presence. Hilda was everything Rojas admired, glamorous, outspoken, and adept at navigating high society. She knew how to play the part of the perfect partner at events, laughing at his jokes and nodding approvingly at his anecdotes. Martha couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for her. Hilda didn't realize she was merely a prop in Rojas's quest for validation. Despite her resentment, Martha harbored no ill will toward Hilda. The real betrayal lay with Rojas, who had not only broken their vows but also underestimated the woman he once claimed to love. Quite resolved. That night, as Rojas and Hilda basked in the glow of their social circle, Martha retreated to her study. She opened her laptop and logged into the secure network that housed her plans for Luxair. The designs for the fleet, the branding concepts, and the financial projections, all of it was there, waiting to be brought to life. Martha's fingers hovered over the keyboard as a slow smile spread across her face. She was done being overlooked. The world would see her for who she truly was, and Rojas would realize too late the treasure he had cast aside. For now, she would remain in the shadows, quietly building her empire. But when the time came, she would emerge with the force of a storm, a force no one, not even Rojas, could ignore. Martha sat in her modest home office, the hum of her computer breaking the silence of the night. The room was small but neatly organized, its walls lined with books on business strategy, aviation, and design. A corkboard above her desk displayed pinned blueprints, photographs of luxury cabins, and notes scribbled in her precise handwriting. This was her sanctuary, the place where her dreams took shape. The beginnings of Luxair were humble, born from sleepless nights and a burning desire to prove herself. It was not just a business idea but a rebellion against the confines of her marriage and the limitations society had placed on her. Martha had no illusions about the challenges ahead. The aviation industry was cutthroat, dominated by established giants, and riddled with barriers for someone like her, a woman without a traditional pedigree in the field. But where others saw obstacles, Martha saw opportunities. The first steps. The idea for Luxair began with Martha's frustration over the lack of true luxury in air travel. She had accompanied Rojas on numerous business trips, often flying first class on airlines that promised opulence but delivered mediocrity. She envisioned something entirely different, a boutique airline that catered to an elite clientele, offering not just comfort but a transformative experience. Martha started small, drawing on her savings and a modest inheritance from her late grandmother. She founded a shell company, Astor Aviation Holdings, to obscure her involvement. Through this entity, she began acquiring the assets she needed: a decommissioned aircraft, a hangar outside the city, and the expertise of a retired aviation engineer named Walter Grayson. Walter was in his late 60s, a gruff but brilliant man who had spent decades designing aircraft for major airlines. When Martha approached him with her vision, he was skeptical at first. But her passion and meticulous planning won him over. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," Walter had said during their first meeting in the cramped hangar. "But guts won't keep a plane in the air. You'll need a team, funding, and a whole lot of luck." "I'll take care of the funding," Martha replied, her voice steady. "I just need someone who believes in this as much as I do." Walter had smiled, a rare occurrence. "Well, let's see if we can make it fly." The team comes together. Building Luxair required more than technical expertise. Martha needed a team of visionaries who shared her commitment to excellence. She reached out to Clara Benson, a former luxury hotel manager with a keen eye for customer service. Clara had recently left her position after clashing with a corporate board that valued profits over guest satisfaction. "You're telling me you want to build an airline where every passenger feels like royalty?" Clara had asked during their interview. Not just royalty, Martha replied. I want them to feel like they're part of something extraordinary. Clara had smiled. Count me in. Next came Eli Santiago, a branding expert who had worked with high-profile fashion labels. Eli was skeptical when he first heard Martha's pitch, but was intrigued by her vision. Aviation isn't exactly glamorous, Eli had said, raising an eyebrow. How are you planning to sell this? With authenticity, Martha replied. People are tired of empty promises. Luxair will deliver. Eli had leaned back in his chair, a smile tugging at his lips. You've got yourself a brand consultant? Funding and secrecy. Securing funding was Martha's greatest challenge. She refused to approach traditional investors, knowing they would demand a level of control she wasn't willing to relinquish. Instead, she tapped into her personal network, leveraging relationships she had built during her early career as a logistics consultant. She also took calculated risks, including mortgaging a property she had inherited and securing loans through Astor Aviation Holdings. The anonymity of her shell company allowed her to move without drawing attention, especially from Rojas. Her husband remained blissfully unaware of her endeavors, too preoccupied with his own business dealings and his affair with Hilda. Rojas's dismissiveness worked to her advantage. He rarely asked about her activities, assuming she spent her days dabbling in unimportant hobbies. This gave Martha the freedom to focus entirely on Luxair. The first flight. After 2 years of relentless work, Luxair was ready for its inaugural flight. The small but dedicated team had transformed the decommissioned aircraft into a masterpiece of luxury. The interiors featured handcrafted leather seats, polished wood accents, and state-of-the-art entertainment systems. The cabin was a symphony of elegance, designed to make passengers forget they were in the air. Martha invited a select group of potential clients and industry insiders to experience the maiden voyage. She remained behind the scenes, allowing Clara to host the event and Walter to showcase the technical achievements. As the plane soared above the clouds, the guests were enthralled. This is unlike anything I've ever experienced, one attendee remarked, sipping champagne from a crystal flute. You've set a new standard. Martha watched from the shadows, a quiet smile on her lips. The flight was a success, but she knew it was only the beginning. Luxair had to grow, and for that she needed to stay one step ahead. The challenges. Growth came with its own set of challenges. As Luxair gained traction, Martha faced increasing pressure to reveal her identity. Investors and media outlets were curious about the mysterious founder behind the brand. Competitors began to take notice, and whispers of sabotage reached her ears. Through it all, Martha remained steadfast. She continued to operate under the radar, shielding her personal life from scrutiny. Her team respected her decision, knowing that her anonymity was part of Luxair's mystique. Meanwhile, Rojas's arrogance grew unchecked. He continued to belittle Martha, oblivious to the empire she was building. His business ventures began to falter, but he refused to acknowledge his mistakes, blaming others for his failures. Hilda, ever the opportunist, encouraged his delusions, feeding his ego while quietly seeking her own advantages. The turning point. One evening, as Rojas hosted yet another lavish dinner party, Martha sat in her office reviewing financial projections for Luxair's expansion. Her phone buzzed with a notification, invitation to speak at the Goldbridge Business Conference. Martha stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The Goldbridge Conference was one of the most prestigious events in the business world, attended by CEOs, investors, and thought leaders. Accepting the invitation would mean stepping into the spotlight and revealing her identity. She thought of Rojas, of his smug dismissals and public humiliations. This was her chance to reclaim her narrative, to show the world, and him, who she truly was. But the decision wasn't just about revenge. It was about integrity, about proving that success could be built on a foundation of respect and authenticity. Martha's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she drafted her response. I accept. As she hit send, a sense of calm washed over her. The time for silence was over. Luxair was ready to take flight, and so was she. The Goldbridge Business Conference was a grand spectacle, held in the sprawling luxury of the Regal Summit Center. The building itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture, gleaming glass panels, towering arches, and marble interiors that sparkled under the warm glow of chandeliers. The air buzzed with anticipation as the world's most influential business leaders gathered for the 3-day event. Deals would be made, partnerships forged, and reputations solidified. For Rojas, this was an opportunity to reassert his dwindling influence. Dressed in a custom-tailored navy suit, he entered the ballroom with Hilda on his arm, her gold evening gown shimmering under the lights. She radiated confidence, flashing practice smiles at everyone they passed, perfectly playing the role of the supportive partner. "This is our night," Rojas whispered to her as they approached a group of investors. "Stick with me and we'll show them who's at the top." Hilda nodded, her laughter airy and light. She was thrilled to bask in the spotlight alongside him, oblivious to the cracks in his carefully curated image. Meanwhile, Martha stood in a quiet room backstage, her hands steady as she adjusted the delicate bracelet on her wrist. She wore a sleek white gown that hugged her figure with an air of understated elegance. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in soft waves that framed her face. Gone was the quiet, unassuming woman who had once been dismissed as plain. In her place stood a figure of poise and authority. "Are you ready?" asked Clara, standing beside her with a clipboard in hand. Clara's confidence in Martha was unwavering, but even she couldn't hide her excitement at what was about to unfold. Martha smiled faintly. "I've been ready for years." The grand entrance. The ballroom was alive with chatter as the evening's keynote speaker was announced. A hush fell over the crowd as the event host, a poised woman in a sleek black dress, took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, her voice commanding. "Tonight, we have the honor of hearing from a true visionary. Our speaker is a leader who has redefined luxury travel, built an empire on values of integrity and excellence, and inspired countless others to pursue innovation without compromise." Rojas leaned back in his chair, sipping his champagne. "Another self-important CEO," he muttered to Hilda, who giggled in agreement. The host's next words wiped the smirk off his face. "Please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Luxair International, Martha Martinez." The room erupted into applause as Martha stepped onto the stage, her head held high. The spotlight illuminated her, reflecting off her gown like liquid light. She looked every bit the leader she had become, graceful, confident, and powerful. Rojas froze, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. His face turned pale as he stared at the woman on stage. For a moment he thought he was seeing things. This couldn't be Martha, his Martha. The wife he had dismissed as unremarkable. And yet it was unmistakably her. Hilda, sensing his tension, leaned closer. "Who is she?" she whispered. Rojas didn't answer. He couldn't. Martha stood behind the podium, scanning the audience with a calm, measured gaze. She took a deep breath before beginning. "Good evening. It is an honor to stand before you tonight at this prestigious event. When I founded Luxair, my vision was simple, to create not just an airline, but an experience that redefines how we think about travel. I wanted to build a company rooted in trust, respect, and innovation." Her voice was smooth and steady, each word carrying the weight of her journey. The audience hung on her every syllable, captivated by the strength she exuded. Rojas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his mind racing. How had she done this? How had she built an empire right under his nose? "As leaders," Martha continued, "we often face choices that test our character. Moments where we must decide between convenience and integrity. In those moments, our decisions define not just our success, but who we are." Her eyes flickered briefly toward Rojas, though she didn't acknowledge him directly. The subtle gesture sent a ripple of tension through the room. People began whispering, some glancing in his direction. "Integrity," Martha said, her voice growing firmer, "is not just about doing what's right when people are watching. It's about doing what's right even when no one is looking. It's about respecting the people who have stood by you, the ones who have helped you rise." Hilda's smile faltered. She looked at Rojas, her expression questioning. "What's going on?" she whispered, her voice tinged with panic. "Quiet," Rojas hissed, his jaw tightening. Martha continued, her tone unwavering. Unfortunately, there are those who mistake kindness for weakness, who believe that betrayal will go unnoticed or unpunished. But life has a way of revealing the truth, doesn't it? The audience murmured in agreement, their attention riveted on Martha. Rojas's face burned with humiliation as the words landed like a series of well-aimed blows. The fallout begins. When Martha finished her speech, the room erupted into a standing ovation. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the grand ballroom. Martha stepped back from the podium, her expression composed but triumphant. As she exited the stage, people began piecing together the truth. Whispers grew louder, and soon, Rojas found himself at the center of unwanted attention. "Isn't that her husband?" someone whispered. He introduced that other woman as his wife earlier, another said, shaking their head in disbelief. Hilda turned to Rojas, her voice low but seething. "You lied to me. She's your wife." "It's not what it looks like," Rojas muttered, though even he didn't believe his own words. Hilda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You humiliated me," she hissed before storming out of the ballroom. All eyes followed her, the whispers growing louder. Rojas was left sitting alone, his once impeccable image crumbling under the weight of judgmental stares. Martha's exit. Backstage, Martha removed the microphone clipped to her gown and handed it to a technician. Clara approached her with a proud smile. "You were incredible," Clara said. "They're already talking about how this will go down as one of the best speeches in Goldbridge history." Martha nodded, her expression calm. "Let them talk." As she exited the building, the crisp evening air greeted her. She glanced up at the star-filled sky, a sense of peace washing over her. For years, she had carried the weight of Rojas's betrayal and dismissiveness. Tonight, she had shed that weight, stepping into the light as the woman she was always meant to be. Her journey was far from over, but she no longer needed validation from anyone, least of all Rojas. She had built something extraordinary and now, the world knew it. As for Rojas, the reckoning had just begun. The ballroom's glittering lights and murmurs of admiration for Martha faded into a dull roar in Rojas's ears. He sat frozen in his chair, his champagne glass untouched, his mind racing. Every glance and whispered word around him felt like a dagger aimed at his pride. The humiliation was palpable. His carefully constructed image, built over years of self-promotion and arrogance, was now in shambles. The truth about Martha, his wife, the woman he had dismissed and belittled, was now public knowledge. And not just any truth, she was a titan in the business world, a leader whose vision and success outshone his own. He tried to gather himself, forcing a smile as he rose to mingle with the crowd. But as he approached a group of colleagues, their polite smiles barely masked the judgment in their eyes. "Rojas," one of them said, his tone clipped. "Quite the surprise tonight, wouldn't you say?" Rojas forced a laugh. Yes, Martha's done well for herself." "Well for herself?" another interjected, his eyebrows raised. "She's the CEO of Luxair. That's more than well. I'd say she's redefined luxury travel." The group quickly dispersed, leaving Rojas standing alone. He clenched his fists, his chest tight with a mix of anger and panic. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. The first cracks. The fallout began almost immediately. The next morning, Rojas's phone buzzed incessantly with messages and calls. What he hoped would be sympathy from colleagues and partners quickly turned into curt messages canceling meetings and severing ties. His assistant, Linda, hesitantly entered his office. "Mr. Rojas," she began, her voice uneasy, "Mr. Graves has decided to withdraw from the merger negotiations. He cited concerns about your judgment." Rojas's head snapped up. "What concerns?" Linda hesitated, holding her tablet tighter. "He mentioned the events at the conference and suggested your personal life might impact your professional reliability." Rojas slammed his hand on the desk. "This is ridiculous. My personal life has nothing to do with my business." Linda said nothing, her eyes filled with quiet pity. She placed the tablet on his desk and left without another word. He picked up his phone and scrolled through social media, only to see headlines that stung like open wounds. Martha Martinez, the visionary CEO behind Luxair. A lesson in integrity, Martha Martinez's triumph at Goldbridge. The fall of Rojas, arrogance and betrayal exposed. Rojas threw his phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. Hilda's exit. Later that afternoon, Rojas returned home to find Hilda packing her things. Her gold jewelry glinted under the sunlight streaming through the windows as she stuffed designer clothes into a leather suitcase. "What are you doing?" Rojas demanded, his voice sharp. "What does it look like?" she snapped, not bothering to look at him. "I'm leaving." "You're overreacting. This whole thing will blow over." Hilda stopped and turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "Blow over? Do you have any idea how humiliated I was last night? People were whispering about me like I'm some kind of joke. Do you think I signed up for this?" Rojas stepped closer, his tone softening. "Hilda, you knew what this was. You knew." "I knew nothing," she interrupted. "You lied to me, Rojas. You said your wife was irrelevant, that she was nothing. And now I find out she's not only brilliant but leagues above you in every way." Rojas reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "Don't touch me," she said coldly. "I've had enough. Find someone else to play your perfect partner." With that, she grabbed her suitcase and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The media frenzy. As days turned into weeks, the media frenzy surrounding Martha's speech only grew. Interviews with her team revealed the depth of her vision and the years of work that had gone into building Luxair. Her humility and grace in the spotlight only amplified the contrast between her and Rojas, whose reputation continued to nosedive. Business partners distanced themselves, citing concerns about his integrity. Investors withdrew their support, and lucrative deals fell apart. Even his social circle, once filled with sycophants eager to bask in his perceived success, began to shrink. The final blow came when the Goldbridge Business Journal published a scathing expose titled, "The Illusion of Rojas Harper: How Ego Destroyed a Career." The article detailed his treatment of Martha, his affair with Hilda, and his declining business ventures. It painted a damning picture of a man consumed by his own arrogance. Desperation. One evening, Rojas sat alone in his once impressive home office, the walls lined with awards and photographs that now felt like relics of a distant past. His phone sat on the desk, and for the first time in years, he hesitated to pick it up. He had lost everything. His business, his reputation, and the women who had once been central to his life. Finally, he dialed a number he hadn't used in months. The line rang and then went to voicemail. "Martha," he said after the beep, his voice strained. "It's me, Rojas. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Please, just give me a few minutes. It's important." He hung up and buried his face in his hands, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like a vice. The world moves on. While Rojas's world fell apart, Martha's continued to soar. Luxair experienced unprecedented growth as bookings surged and partnerships flourished. Martha's keynote speech had become a rallying cry for leaders who valued integrity over ambition. In her sleek new office overlooking the city, Martha reviewed proposals for Luxair's expansion. Her assistant, Clara, entered with a tablet in hand. "Martha," Clara said with a smile, "we've been invited to speak at the International Leadership Summit. They're calling you the face of ethical leadership." Martha looked up, a faint smile on her lips. "Let's do it. It's time we show the world what leadership can truly look like." As Clara left to make the arrangements, Martha leaned back in her chair, her thoughts drifting briefly to Rojas. His voicemail had gone unanswered, and she felt no obligation to respond. Forgiveness was a gift she had already given herself, and closure came from knowing she had risen above his betrayal. Her focus now was on the future, a future she had built with her own hands, free from the shadows of her past. The private Luxair corporate boardroom, located in a sleek high-rise overlooking the city, was the epitome of modern elegance. The walls were lined with glass, offering panoramic views of the skyline, while the minimalist decor radiated professionalism. Martha sat at the head of the long mahogany table, her posture poised and confident. She wore a tailored navy suit, the subtle sheen of the fabric catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Across from her sat Rojas, his once pristine appearance now frayed around the edges. His tailored suit seemed a size too large, and his face bore the lines of sleepless nights. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by visible anxiety as he fidgeted with his cufflinks. "Thank you for meeting me," Rojas began, his voice low and unsteady. He glanced around the room, noting its understated opulence. Everything about it screamed power and control, qualities he once believed were exclusively his. Martha leaned back in her chair, her expression calm but unreadable. "You said you wanted to talk. I'm here. Speak." A plea for redemption. Rojas took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "Martha, I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I was blind to what I had, blind to who you were. I let my ego and my insecurities drive me, and I hurt you in ways I can never undo." Martha's face remained impassive, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion. She gestured for him to continue. "I thought I was the one holding everything together," Rojas admitted, his voice cracking. "But now I see, it was always you. Your strength, your intelligence, your vision. Luxair, it's incredible. You're incredible." Martha tilted her head slightly, her gaze piercing. "And what is it you want from me now, Rojas? Forgiveness? Redemption? A second chance?" He swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him. I want to fix things. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be better. Professionally, personally. I want to be the kind of man you deserved from the start." Martha's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "Better late than never, I suppose." Martha's response. The room fell into a heavy silence as Martha leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and deliberate. "Rojas, for years, I allowed myself to believe that my worth was tied to your approval. I worked harder, gave more, and sacrificed my own dreams, hoping you would see me. But all you saw was what you wanted to see, a plain woman who was convenient to dismiss." Rojas flinched but said nothing. "You underestimated me," Martha continued, her voice gaining strength. "But worse than that, you underestimated yourself. You chose shallow victories, fleeting pleasures, and easy paths. And now, you sit here, asking for a second chance, not because you've changed, but because you have nothing left." Rojas opened his mouth to protest, but Martha raised a hand, silencing him. "I've already forgiven you," she said, her tone softening slightly. "Not for your sake but for mine. Carrying anger and resentment only weighed me down. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean giving you another chance to hurt me." The final goodbye. Rojas's shoulders slumped as her words sank in. He had come here hoping for a lifeline, a chance to rebuild what he had destroyed. Instead, he found himself staring at the unyielding strength of a woman who had risen far beyond him. "Is there nothing I can do to make this right?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Martha stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "You can make it right by learning from your mistakes. By becoming the man you should have been, not for me, but for yourself." She extended a hand, her expression calm but resolute. "Goodbye, Rojas. I wish you the best." Rojas stared at her hand for a moment before shaking it. The gesture felt final, a symbolic closing of a chapter he knew he would never reopen. A new flight. Later that evening, Martha stood on the tarmac of a private Luxair terminal, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the gleaming fuselage of her personal jet. The Luxair logo, a symbol of her triumph, stood proud against the twilight sky. Her assistant, Clara, approached with a clipboard. "The itinerary is finalized, Martha. The International Leadership Summit is excited to have you as their keynote speaker." Martha nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Thank you, Clara. Let's make sure everything is perfect." As Clara walked away, Martha ascended the steps of the jet, the cool evening breeze ruffling her hair. Inside, the cabin was a masterpiece of luxury and sophistication, a reflection of the empire she had built. She settled into her seat by the window, watching as the ground crew prepared for takeoff. As the engines roared to life and the plane lifted off, Martha felt a profound sense of peace. The city lights below grew smaller, fading into the distance as she soared higher into the sky. She had left behind the shadows of her past, carrying with her the lessons they had taught her. This was her life now, one of strength, independence, and limitless possibilities. Rojas was a part of her story, but he no longer defined it. She was free. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.